terms of the, the fuel that is actually consumed. Let's touch on the green fuels for shipping. Green hydrogen and green ammonia are touted to be the most promising alternative fuels for shipping if you have to achieve our 2050 goals. While the use of carbon scrubbers can start today, which have already, this can effectively, the use of carbon scrubbers can actually reduce the potential SOx emissions by almost 98%. We need to look at the sustained availability of green fuels and the ability for existing vessels to switch to greener fuels. A 2024 study has revealed that green ammonia would be a very viable option to decarbonize international shipping by 2050. This can be used to fuel the demands as much as 60% of the global needs. And this takes almost about $2 trillion of investment to actually put up the facility in about 10 fuel ports globally in that sense. So 10 ports that we've actually seen, if they're actually fitted with those capabilities at a cost of $2 trillion, it can actually reduce the demands by almost 60%. The other part of the solution is to either retrofit the 60,000 vessels with engines that can use the hydrogen or ammonia as a fuel, and then replace with new vessels before 2050. But this will actually take a substantial amount of investments. Retrofitting each vessel can cost almost $10 to $15 million per ship, depending on the size of the ship and obviously the fuel that is going to be used. And so therefore, the more viable option and more easier option would be essentially to have new ships built, that can actually use this fuel. And of course, as the ship gets closer to end of life, it's going to be more and more expensive to actually retrofit. The current order books for new vessels are dominated by methanol and methane powered vessels, although ammonia is predicted to be the most efficient and effective fuel to achieve our 2050 goals. This is because the lack of defined standards and equipment for safe handling and transportation of ammonia, which needs to be really developed urgently. The second point is really about the electrification of ports. This is critically important because electrification of ports offers a dual advantage of reducing the operating cost as well as the maintenance cost, apart from obvious reduction of carbon emissions. Electrification of all portside equipment across the globe can save almost 10 to 15 million tons of carbon dioxide in terms of potential emissions. The electrification of the RTG cranes can reduce a port's diesel consumption by almost 60%. A high bay container storage system that has been pioneered in some places in Dubai and going to be piloted in Korea now can actually fully electrify yard operations, eliminating almost 60% of unproductive moves, right? So huge impact on efficiency, and utilize solar power to augment the grid supply electricity while simultaneously tripling the yard capacity. So in places where there's lack of space, you can actually make use of little space to actually get more efficiency. Separately, ports must replace their source of electricity from fossil fuel-based power to renewable power sources such as wind and solar. Ports themselves can reduce almost 10 to 12% of their power expenditure by just installing solar panels within the ports to support auxiliary systems such as lighting. The third point that I wanted to mention today is about multimodalism. There's a direct correlation between multimodalism and the cost of transport, but also in terms of the emissions, because there are more sustainable modes of transport than just trucking as we know it. So typically a multimodal supply chain, which predominantly uses rail or coastal shipping for the long haul, right? And of course the road for the short haul, the first and the last mile, it would be 30% less carbon emitting, 30% less carbon emitting than just using trucks for long haul. And so this is, there's obviously a business case out here to use more and more of multimodalism. The push for multimodalism among short sea shipping in Indian waterways will further boost the use of maritime transport and ports, bringing domestic cargo into the field of maritime transport in a very, very big way. So for example, if you have to go from the north of India to the south of India, you can do a first mile to the nearest inland container depot, take a rail-based transport from North India into a port on the western coast or the eastern coast, and then coastal shipping from then on to say a Cochin or a Tuticorin, and then a last mile to the place where the goods are to be consumed. And we've seen 30 to 40% carbon emission savings as a result of this end-to-end multimodalism move in that sense, right? And a cost differential of almost 10 to 15% that we've seen in a few pilot cases. So there is definitely a business case to do more of multimodalism. But quite obviously, The use of multimodalism is not that easy simply because there are transfers of goods, there is an end-to-end piece involved, there is technology that has to be used. We also have to make sure that the transfers are effectively managed if there are different vendors involved, and clients don't want to actually deal with so many vendors in that sense. So they would prefer actually doing an end-to-end transport where trucking is concerned just with one vendor. So I think there is a need to actually use technology. There's a need to integrate the different vendors. There's a need to actually show the transparency in terms of where the goods are and when they will reach and what is plan B if it doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, the last piece that I want to talk about is really about the policy interventions and the government's role. And there are a host of initiatives that have actually been launched. The first is, of course, the Honorable Prime Minister's Maritime India Vision 2030, the Gati Shakti National Master Plan, which really emphasizes holistic, sustainable development and environmental consciousness, all three going in the same thread. The Harit Sagar or the Green Port Guidelines also aims to improve sustainability of port operations. The National Green Hydrogen Mission, which is an extremely important initiative and is expected to, contribute effectively towards our 2040 and our 2050, milestones. And then just to conclude, by embracing sustainable practices, policymakers, investors, and industry stakeholders can collectively drive economic growth while safeguarding the environment without affecting the potential growth of the sector in the run. Green shipping also has a potential to, for a wide variety of solutions that can combine efficient logistics and sustainable development. During our discussion today, we'll aim at identifying and consulting relevant stakeholders to be able to elicit the required inputs. We also will gauge short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals to target sustainable growth and development practices in the shipping sector. We also aim to take this opportunity to foster a very insightful discussion together with you for knowledge exchange, collaborative efforts to propel the sector towards carbon neutrality, pollution reduction, and an adoption of innovative green technologies and cleaner alternative fuels for shipping. Thank you all once again for joining this conclave. A very hearty welcome to everybody out here, and I wish this conclave turns out to be as fruitful and as relevant as the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for setting the context. Green Shipping is a collaborative program launched by TEDI to assist the National Center of Excellence in Green Ports and Shipping setup by the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways. The program is undertaking cutting-edge research around development and demonstration of sustainable and cleaner technology fuels in the sector. It's my honor to now invite Director General TEDI, Dr. Vibha Dhawan, to kindly share her perspective.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And actually, it's an honor for me to be participating in this particular conference today. Well, as rightly introduced, the subject of the need for green shipping, and I'll start with that. Why are we even discussing about shipping sector to go green? Because I'm sure there are far more knowledgeable persons sitting over here in the shipping sector, so I don't have to touch upon that. But the overall crisis that we are facing today because of the changing climate. And really speaking, it is that practically all sectors, all of us are contributing to the changing climate, and all of us are getting impacted due to the changing climate. What is also happening is that while we are recognizing that there is need to act, there are also international regulations which are coming to play, and very heavily, I should say, on the developing part of the world. Because when we talk of cross-boundary carbon taxation, we are talking of other legislations which are coming into play that necessitates that as country also we move much faster than what we are doing. And it goes without saying that Honorable Prime Minister and otherwise the way country is moving, we are not saying that these are compulsions. We are taking it that for our own survival also we need to take action today, rather we should have taken it yesterday. And that's how this center, National Center for Excellence on Clean Ports and Shipping was developed. I must acknowledge, of course, it goes without saying that it is first of all, Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways, and thank you, Secretary Sir, for faith. In fact, when we developed this, he was heading one of the ports and we had discussions with him during that time. Mr. Madhu Nair, he was front runner, I should say, in ensuring that, or rather saying that this kind of center is required. You may be asking a question, why TERI? And maybe some of you are aware about organization TERI. We are in our 50th year. It was set up by Tata Group of Companies, and basically in 1974, when no one was talking about renewable energy, it was set up as Tata Energy Research Institute to look into what other alternative sources of energy can be there. In 1989, we were the first one to convene international conference in India on climate change. 1989, like when we talk of sustainability, in 1997, when our country was celebrating its 50th anniversary, we brought out a publication called Green India 2047, which talked about that, yes, we have developed, but this path of development is not sustainable. And therefore, it's not like an activist organization. Rather, we brought out another publication, which was Disha, that how can you change your route? Business as usual is not going to work, and therefore you have to take action well in advance. And of course, that journey continued, and we got into other areas as well. But then somewhere sustainability and decarbonization, climate change, that remain in the heart of TERI. Our strengths in why this National Center of Excellence, it's largely that we are working with various industries on developing their decarbonization pathways. We are looking at new technologies, and I'll also like to mention to the August gathering that just last month, Minister of Power, so we were interacting with him, and he announced that TERI will be setting up a Institute on Energy Transition with Ministry of Power. So basically, what we are looking at, what are the other sources of energy that can change, like you have to develop, as a country we have to develop, and therefore that development has to be green, and there are other alternatives available. I'll also like to mention that in National Center of Excellence, what we are looking at, it's the entire process, because you look at the ports, do we even have standards today in terms of any standards? So each port is different from the other. There are good practices, so let's bring them on the table. And I'll say not just in India, we are talking in the international arena. We don't have to reinvent the broken wheel. We have to learn from their experiences and bring those technologies to our country, but not copy them, but indigenize them. And for that, you need a lot of research to be done. And then is the fuel itself, because right now, the oil which is used by the ships, it's very heavy oil and a lot of sulfur emissions are there. So can those be reduced? And the entire value chain, things like just arrival of the ships so that they are not standing in water, because ultimately waters are common and therefore we can't, or no country can afford loss of biodiversity and so on in waters because of the sailing ships. And the entire logistics, because when you talk of ports, it's also that the trucks which come there, they should also be green, because otherwise your whole purpose gets defeated. So that is the entire, in a way, you can say the entire chain of shipping sector that National Center will be looking into. We also believe that there is some component of training, and especially for the new technologies when you are talking of hydrogen or ammonia. So that training and associated research, maybe even nanoparticles to improve combustion and so on. So that's what we will be looking into in partnership with institutes within the country as well as overseas. And I'm sure this Institute on Energy Transition will also play a very important role in ensuring that we go for decarbonization of the shipping sector. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm sure you are going to have a very fruitful day full of lively discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dhawan, for sharing your perspective. At FICCI, we hold knowledge in the highest regard. We recognize the value of learning from the past, drawing lessons that shape our strategies for future. Keeping this in mind, FICCI, in partnership with PwC, has prepared a report on green shipping and ports. I will request Secretary Sir to kindly release this report. I would also request other dignitaries on the dais to join us for the report and invite Dhruv, Partner, Transport and Logistics, PwC, to join us on the stage, please, for the report. Ladies and gentlemen, the report outlines India's maritime sustainability efforts, including green port guidelines, green vessel development, and positioning India as a global hydrogen hub. It will also present a comprehensive view of the transformative initiatives like India's Green Voyage program with IMO, policy measures, and the setting up of a centralized decarbonization cell. Thank you so much. Without any further ado, I will now request the Secretary, Ministry of Port Shipping and Waterways, Mr. T.K. Ramachandran, to deliver his keynote address, please.
Thank you very much, and like to wish everyone a very good morning, and compliments to FICCI for the this workshop of Conclave on green shipping and ports, unlocking opportunities for a sustainable maritime future. I think no topic could be more relevant at this stage in our journey as a nation and of course for the world. And I should compliment FICCI that they put together an audience and a group of speakers who are extremely relevant for this subject, who are all experts, many of whom are experts. And hopefully this conclave will yield some more insights into this green journey. As you're all aware, the importance of the green economy is something that has been emphasized over and over again. Like the Honorable Prime Minister says, we are part of a sector where we want to do greening and greening of the blue economy. That's what he says, greening of the blue economy. Therefore, the entire ports, shipping and waterways sector, which our ministry looks after, is now part of the blue economy. And the blue economy just does not restrict itself to waterways or coasts or ports, but the entire ocean surrounding us. And that's, as you know, a huge area. Therefore, it involves not just the ports or shipping, but it also involves other aspects of the ecosystem. So when we start this journey, first, I'll just tell you something about what we already have done and what we need and what is our vision, and then what we hope to do in the next few years. As you are aware, the port sector has witnessed a significant growth and revival over the last decade. Our capacities have doubled. The cargo handling capacities of the major ports have doubled. If you look at the qualitative indices, on the international shipment rank, we have jumped from the 44th to the 22nd rank. Our vessel turnaround times are now come down to less than a day, 0.9 days. And 24 national waterways have now been operationalized as against 3 operational NWs a decade earlier. And the transport using inland waterways has increased by 320%, while coastal cargo is 104%. I'm mentioning this in the context of what Mr. Rizwan said, that the movement by waterways is much, much cheaper and of course environmentally more friendly than rail, which is further more environmentally friendly than road. So the shift, modal shift is very important, and I'm glad to share with you that this modal shift is already happening and that it needs to be taken forward. So this is on what has already been done in terms of achievements. Of course, the green part, I'll just be coming to that. The second part is, do we have a vision? Yes. So the Amritkal vision that was talked about, the 2047 vision that was talked about, has already been framed, has already been launched by the Honorable Prime Minister in October 23. I think we were the first ministry to actually launch the vision. And you know that it's both for us a vision and a mission, because we exist because we want to be green and we want to do everything in a green manner. But our vision is that by 2047, all our ports will be completely green. And we have a series of themes in that vision, and many of them pertain to green, the green concept. And the latest program that has been announced, which is of the Viksit Bharat, which is basically about, developed India in 2047, also talks about green. And our vision is that when our GDP is 32 trillion in 2047 and our exports are about 7 trillion, we will need port capacity which is much higher. And we are now at about 2,600 million tons, about 4 times that, about 10,000 million tons is the kind of capacities we will require. And therefore, the enormous increase in GDP and the port capacity would ordinarily be accompanied by also enormous degradation, environmental degradation. But we are conscious of the fact that underpinning this entire effort has to be the sustainability mantra. And therefore, whatever we say, whatever we do, we are always talking about green. And the green is also part of the Panchamrit commitments which the Honorable PM has been talking about, and our Honorable Minister has also been supporting. And as you are aware that in order to be green, it's not enough that we just decide that, okay, all our ships will be green or all our ports will be green. We also need to do the ecosystem. And there we have followed the IMO guidelines. Luckily for us, we have a very, very supportive, proactive IMO, which is, set many standards. And whether it's fuels, whether it's vessels, whether it's ports, a sea change which is happening at the IMO, and a large number of committees are looking into the standards. And unless you have standards, we can't, because we are an international industry, and therefore we need to have international standards. So having said that, in India, what have we been doing in the last few years which enhances our commitment to this entire green concept, sustainability concept? The first thing is that we need an institutional arrangement. Secondly, we need policies and frameworks. Thirdly, we need commitment of resources, financial, people, funds, materials, infrastructure, whatever. And we need know-how, research to happen. And this both on the ecosystem side as well as the system side, which means the ports and the vessels. So the first thing is, you may be aware that we have set up the Center for National Center for Excellence in Green Ports and Shipping. So that is part of the institutional arrangement which will look at various green initiatives. Apart from this, we have a framework which is called the Harit Sagar Guidelines, which we issued last year. which will enable the ports to all transition into the green realm. And then we also have the green tug guidelines which we issued, which means that tugs in all the ports will now transition to becoming green. They're all burning fuel and they should all become green. Similarly, on the waterways, we had the Harit Nauka policy which we introduced a few months back. And under this, we envision that all our vessels which now use the waterways will all get converted into green. And you might be aware that a few days back, the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, launched the first green vessel, which CMD is here. So we launched the first green vessel, hydrogen vessel. And before that, of course, the Cochin Water Metro, all of you are aware, all electric vessels. And two more vessels, electric vessels, were launched in Varanasi and Ayodhya last month, in January, that is. Therefore, a large number of these initiatives are only meant to bring before our commitment to the sustainability philosophy. In this, the other things that we've done, 4 of our ports, JNPA, DPA, PPA, and VOCPA, are already now have their energy requirements completely met by green sources, which means either solar or wind. And the hydrogen hub, the first green hydrogen hub port, was launched in Tuticorin again last month by the Honorable Prime Minister. So what is our vision? Is that in the green ecosystem, you require renewable energy. So in Tuticorin, we have both of that. We have solar, wind, and now also we are proposing offshore wind. Then you require water, and we've sanctioned a desal plant. Then you require land, and 400 acres of land have been allotted to different companies who have come forward to put up electrolyzers to manufacture hydrogen, green hydrogen. And one more thing is, we are only committed to green hydrogen. So there are a lot of people who talk of, various other colors, gray, brown, black, and so on. But we are very sure that it's all going to be green for us. And we have identified 3 hubs. One of them is Kandla, one of them is Tuticorin, the other is Paradeep. And all these 3 hubs will act as the pilots where the green hydrogen movement, the green hydrogen production will take off. In fact, yesterday I was having a meeting with L&T and of course Mr. Sumar, and there are so many dots which need to be connected. We need to, on the one hand, do the vessels. On the other hand, like I said, we need to do the ports, the ecosystem. And in Norway, we found that it's ammonia which is being pushed. Of course, a few months back, Maersk had launched their methanol vessel, and the order book is full of methanol and ammonia. So we are going that way. But at IMO, it's all multi-fuel. It's not one single fuel, it's all multi-fuel. And as far as green ports are concerned, the ecosystem that I was talking about, so water we have, land we have, and I was also telling others there that land, water, wind, sun. That's all it requires to make energy today. And we have ample quantities of all the 4, and which many other countries don't. And therefore, if we can produce energy locally using these 4 great resources, and at Tuticorin, like I was telling you, we have water, we have huge amounts of land, a lot of barren land where solar can come up, and luckily the Western Ghats are nearby, therefore you have a funnel and a lot of wind, so you have wind energy, you have offshore wind, one of the belts apart from Gujarat where offshore wind can come up. And then of course you have human resources, and you have water because it's near the sea, and you have desal, and that's all you require. So with this, I invite there are any companies who want to do hydrogen at Tuticorin, and we also sanctioned money to convert some of our ships at SCI into methanol ships. A couple of them already in the process. 80 crores have been sanctioned, and 35 crores to put up this pilot ecosystem at Tuticorin. So I think that a seminar, a conclave of this kind can really come up with a lot of ideas. And one thing I'm sure, whether we have people coming from outside, whether people coming from the private sector, or whether people coming in from, from the research side. We will ensure that wherever ideas are generated, wherever in the world, we will pick them up, we will implement them, and we will ensure that we will find ways of doing something that will lead us to 100% renewable energy, 100% efficient ports within a period of about 5 years. People might talk of 25, 10, etc., but I think in 5 years it is doable. And if not in the international shipping, at least coastal and river inland waterways, that is under our control. So we are working at making that completely green in 5 years. So I hope we will have your support, and I hope the deliberations of this conclave will help us do that. And at any time anyone wants to talk to us, give us ideas, please do come forward. We have, of course, all the FICCI members here, and we have all the consultants. But often I find one-to-one discussions come up with a lot of new, fresh insights which help us to frame policy and to frame policy to take this green movement forward. Thank you, FICCI and Ms. Nirja, for again giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir, for this detailed insights into the government vision towards maritime sustainability. We are confident that under your dynamic leadership, we will surely achieve the laid objectives. I would now invite Ms. Nirja Singh, Assistant Secretary General, FICCI, to propose the formal word of thanks, please.
Dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, a very good morning. I would keep it extremely brief, given Secretary has a time commitment to attend some meeting. Just a few things that I would like to highlight is our presidency in G20 has given us, as India, a position to lead the role in sustainability and important a transition to net zero shipping. Now, today's conference is an effort from FICCI to initiate dialogue and promote deliberations around green shipping. These discussions are going to serve as a catalyst driving collective action towards greener maritime practices. It's our privilege to have Mr. T.K. Ramachandran, Secretary Shipping, to be with us today. So thank you for taking out time and so well articulating the vision of Government of India towards a greener maritime future. I am also grateful to Dr. Vibha Dhawan for being with us today, also taking us through a journey of TERI. I mean, if you look at it, talking about sustainability way back then when everything was just manufactured, there was somebody who was thinking about a cleaner future, and that was Tata Group in India, and that is how the TERI has come forward. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us today. I take this opportunity also to acknowledge Mr. Madhu Nair, who has been a stalwart in leading the green initiatives in India, in our audience here today. And most sincere acknowledgement to our own Mr. Rizwan Suma, Chairman FICCI Committee on Logistics, for his vision and guidance in steering FICCI's initiatives in this direction. So it's his leadership and commitment that makes us do and pick up areas which are not today. Green is more of a talk which we are trying to move towards action, and the people sitting on this dais, if you look at it, it is the industry leader, it is the policy makers and the research. These representatives are going to take a collaborative action towards green shipping. And FICCI as an organization will stand with all of them and work in amplifying the impact, amplifying the messages from the industry leaders, from the research institutes, from the government, to our audience, to our industry, whom we represent. The discussions during the day will focus on ESG goals and the vision and the key initiatives for Indian ports. We will encourage a wholehearted participation from all of you. Lastly, it's my duty to thank our sponsors who have made today's program happen. Our gold sponsors, JM Bakshi Group, a logistics partner, DP World, silver partner, Cochin Shipyard, and knowledge partner, PwC. Once again, I would just highlight that the collaborative action from the research, from the industry, from the government is going to make a greener future for India and Indian maritime sector. With this, we will just take a small break as the delegates on the dais depart and reassemble for the first session. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today.
Ladies and gentlemen, after a very insightful inaugural session, it's time to move on to the panel discussion that will talk about the various initiatives and vision required for green shipping and ports in the country. I'm pleased to welcome our dignitaries for the session. Mr. R. Lakshmanan, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Port Shipping and Waterways. Mr. Madhu Nair, CMD, Cochin Shipyard. Mr. Christian Carter, Country Director and Commercial Councillor, Innovation Norway, India. Mr. Manish Jaiswal, Chief Technology Officer, JM Baxi. Mr. Hitesh Lachwani, Senior Director, HSE, DP World. And our moderator for the session, Mr. Dhruv Garg. Dhruv, over to you.
Very good morning to everyone. Thank you, Komal. So I again must start with complimenting Vicky for the choice of the topic for this session, right? Green shipping and ports, initiatives, vision, and innovation, right? And I'll talk about just quickly about a little bit of all. Till this morning, I was in Middle East, and there was conversations happening on similar topics, right? And they were just super impressed on the type of initiatives which Indian players are taking right now in green shipping and ports, the vision which the government has envisaged for it, and all the new innovative projects which are there, right? And the conversation, till very late has always been, how do I invest in India? What is the next wave of infrastructure opportunity? This was the first time the conversation actually veered the other way. That how can these innovative companies, how can these innovations come to our countries? And that's really the power of vision and innovation, right? That it can actually help turn those things around. This is a very, very pertinent topic in the scheme of things, as Secretary Sir also talked about, right? And I'm really glad to have a wonderful set of panelists who can cover all basics and hopefully have a very interactive session with all of you. We, of course, have, Mr. R. Lakshmanan, sir, from the government side to give the overall perspective of the vision. And we have the players who have done it from whether it's the public sector, from the Cochin Shipyard, and all private sector, as well as the global view, which Mr. Christian will bring through the table. So without any further ado, I will jump into this discussion. We will try to have a couple of rounds of panel discussion. And then hopefully we will try to keep some time of about 15 minutes or so for some Q&A. I'm sure there will be quite a few questions which you might be wanting to discuss as well. So right, so I will jump into it and straight away I will probably bring Lakshmanan sir, come to you. We heard Secretary sir, talk about the broader Amrit Kal vision, the criticality of ESG and sustainability and how the focus has been. And then there's been so much focus on specific guidelines, whether it's Harit Sagar, Harit Nauka. Could you give us a little more deeper insight into the specifics of the vision and how you are actually looking to break this down and take it forward?
Thanks, Dhruv, for that question. I think Secretary would have articulated the larger vision that the government is committed to. Like if we, break it up sectorally, to start with the inland waters, where we have come up with the Harit Nauka guidelines. So this essentially is a, policy document which kind of lays out the roadmap for the inland vessel green transition, with the objective that by 2047, all the, vessels on inland waters would be green. So that is the larger, target. But where are we today and what are we doing? And, we are looking at close to 5,000 vessels over the next, 7 to 10 years time span. So that is the, immediate thing that we are looking at. And we are looking at vessels which are, electric as one of the primary, means of greening. And second prominent thing which is coming up is the hydrogen fuel cell based ferries, where we have had the first, ferry which was very recently flagged off by our Honorable PM. In terms of electric, Kochi Water Metro has taken the lead, and the next couple of vessels are in, the National Waterway 1, Ganga, and we are looking at a strong pipeline. In terms of hydrogen fuel cell ferry, like the first ferry has come, but we are, looking at replicating it in 5 cities across the country with, 5 vessels in each city, so that like we have a small ecosystem to understand how things operate, how bunkering operates. So we have reached out to the other stakeholders like the oil marketing companies and others who can supply the fuel and, put up the bunkering, so that, we are tying up the ecosystem together. And third on this, like we are looking at, methanol engines and, methanol fueled ferries or vessels. So we are in advanced stages of coming up with a, pilot and probably partnering with the industry for the methanol engine development. And solar hybrid, that's again a, key thing which we are looking at in the inland waterway space. So which has a lot of potential that already has been deployed in, certain states, especially with focus on tourism. So this is happening on the inland waterway space. Coming to the shipping, already we have sanctioned 2 methanol engine retrofits with SCI doing it. But going forward, we are looking at a larger, shipbuilding support, and within that, green has a predominant focus, wherein the greener vessels have a higher policy support in terms of 20% for electric powered and 30% financial support for the, other hydrogen methanol powered kind of fuel powered vessels. And we are also actively looking at setting up a maritime sectoral development fund. So this is, of course, in initial stages. It is in, kind of a concept stage. We are actively working on it, but we are hopeful that in the months to come, we'll be able to, put this together, which will provide a big fillip to the overall shipbuilding with focus on the greening. So that's a big push that we are working towards. And on the port side, the vision is very clear. We have already come up with the, Harit Sagar guidelines, which talks about greening of ports in terms of their own energy use, their own emissions, and so on. And also supporting the green ammonia and green hydrogen push that India is, making. So already 3 ports are leading this. Tuticorin is in the forefront, where we launched it as the first hydrogen hub port in India, with a lot of associated facilities coming up there. And similarly, Paradip Port already has applied for environment clearance for setting up a dedicated hydrogen export or a handling berth. And state government of Orissa is supporting by allotting, land for production facilities in and around the port vicinity. Similarly, Kandla Port is running a, expression of interest process where many of you would have participated, and it is in advanced stages of, the land being allotted and other, associated infrastructure coming up there. So on all the 3 fronts, port, shipping, and waterways, there is a very clear-cut, long-term vision for moving towards the green transition.
Great, thank you, sir. And that really helps to kind of put light to that vision, right? It's not just about a broad statement of saying we want to be carbon neutral, etc. It clearly shows that the government is thinking around very specific actionable areas which you just talked about, right? And just, taking up one of those key actionable areas and probably coming to you, Mr. Nair, on that is, of course, the whole, electric ferries and the hydrogen fuel ferries, etc., which have been, of course, in the news of the wonderful work you have been doing. But how do you see, whether it's this technology or other technologies, how do you see this scaling up? What else do you believe is required as part of the ecosystem to really help scale up to the scale and size which sir is talking about?
Thanks, Drew. And I think Mr. Lakshman has brought out the salient features like how we are trying to evolve this ecosystem. See, as was mentioned and as Secretary had briefly mentioned, it's very clear that the future would be multi-fuel. And multi-fuel, again, the type of vessels. If we are talking ferry kind of a operation, extremely near coastal, short sea, and high seas. So these are going to be in different buckets. So your question, like the hydrogen fuel cell vessel and how we are going to scale it up. See, for us, the hydrogen fuel cell vessel, which Cochin Shipyard has recently launched and which was in the news recently. See, for us, it's a very significant milestone in it that it was about technology demonstration. And the difference here is this fuel cell which has been used, and it's not just about Cochin Shipyard, it's about teaming up in India, which is also something which we are trying to see because we are talking about the word ecosystem. It's again very clear that just like it's going to be multi-fuel, it's also going to be interdisciplinary. Hereafter, I don't think one company or one shipyard or one player is going to do it. It's not possible. So unless we are ready to team up and team up respectfully, nothing can be built up. So what this particular vessel, the significance is not just from the technology point of view, but it's that a PSU like ours has teamed up with a company like KPIT, which is a global Indian multinational company. And it's not a manufacturer, it's a tech company. It's an Indian tech company in automobile mobility space globally. The India classification societies are coming. The gas suppliers, we don't know how to handle gas, but a gas supplier has come in. Safety standards, safety systems, the regulators have come in. So the kind of multidisciplinary approach that has resulted in this fuel cell. And it's an all-Indian know-how, including the core IP rights of the fuel cell is with the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. So it's a CSIR technology coming to KPIT. So what we were wanting to say is like there was this common feel that these things, while we do things in India, we are also wanting to, we are all talking with proven and established players like a Ballard from Canada. This is also being discussed. So we will see multiple type of technologies, multiple type of teaming up that's happening. So when we are now talking about how do we scale this up, there are two parts here. One is about the policies and a subtle nudge from the government of what we want over a period of time. You can't do this very fast. So the industry at large sees what is the sense of direction, and you make your investments towards it. Second one is, will it be all pervading? Will everyone move into this? It's a clear case of people will move into it, the industry, private sector will move into it if it's commercially viable. So that commercial viability is not just on the technology and on the vessel, which as a technologist I can say, when people say 5-10 years, I feel it's less than 3 years. We will be there. We'll be there and we'll be very, very competitive. Competitive in India, competitive with the rest of the world. The second part is the energy, the gas, the hydrogen. And that, again, the confidence is coming from the fact that you talk the names, Reliance, Larsen & Toubro, Adani, Indian Oil Corporation, HPCL, NTPC, BPCL, everyone. 8 of those top big-time players committing big time. There have been various figures of hydrogen that's been talked about. People have talked about $1 a kg. I would be fine if we see $3 a kg. And I think it's actually possible, the kind of electrolyzers that's coming up. So when we see $3 a kg, and when we see the vessels, the pricing levels, what I am talking about, then this equation is solved. Then hydrogen would be all over India. But what is the timeline? We can all have our views on this, but then my take is we are talking around 5 years' time. Something like that, we would see this happen. But again, is it just hydrogen? It's not just hydrogen. We need to talk parallelly, and methanol is the closest one which we are talking, and Mr. Lakshman had briefly mentioned, and it's very important that we actually drive these methanol engines, at least in the inland waterways and the coastal ones. The smaller, the mid-sized engines need to be converted to methanol. So there are good companies who are wanting and keen. I understand the framework will come in. Ammonia will be a little bit more down the line. But again, LNG and right now batteries. So we will see a set of vessels which would be battery electric, which could be even LNG battery, we could see methanol, we could see hydrogen, but all of this in a few numbers. So as was briefly mentioned, if you can see about 15 hydrogen vessels in India in the let's say next 2 and odd years, 3 years time, I think that should be good. That will set the belief because people want to touch and feel before they take the next steps forward.
Wonderful, Mr. Nair. Thank you for that, and again putting in the specifics of what is required. And as you rightly said, it's not just one player; it's the ecosystem, and the focus needs to be development of ecosystem and interdisciplinary and teaming up. And speaking of teaming up, maybe Mr. Christian, I'll come to you, right? I mean, it's not just about having the know-how within India, which is of course very critical, but also how you bring about the knowledge which others have, and with the India-Norway partnership which is there, and Norway being at forefront of many of these initiatives. How do you see that partnership evolving? Could you shed some light on, what's it's been about specifically on the green aspects of it?
Thank you for the question, and good morning, everyone. So let me start by saying that we've been working, with electrification and future fuels and digitalization for decades now, and we are already the leader in battery electric propulsion in this short sea space. And there are two main reasons why we have been able to achieve that position that we have today as far as technology is concerned, and also the development of the ecosystems. And that is, of course, the sort of the innovation capabilities that we have. We're a small country. We're used to share. We are a very transparent society. We have also very, transparent collaboration across industry, research, government. So that's a good starting point, right? That, sort of enables and facilitates innovation, and then you also have the solutions coming, at the end of the day. The second thing is that we are a very transparent economy. So we are very, let's say, transparent in the sense that we have a lot of, there's a low threshold for collaboration internationally. So when we, for example, I come from the oil and gas industry, I was in the subsea space, and when Norway discovered oil and gas outside on the Norwegian continental shelf, we didn't have the offshore technology, so we sourced it from the US, right? So they brought the technology to Norway. We opened up, we imported a lot of their services, their equipment, their technologies, and now we have emerged as the world leader in subsea space, in the oil and the offshore space. So so these are the two, let's say, briefly speaking, the two main reasons. I think we are really now evolving, developing a very strong, firm collaboration with India, especially in the green shipping space. And we have already very good references and projects that really showcases that. And I assume many of you have heard of, the two electric autonomous vessels that were built, delivered by Cochin Shipyard to a Norwegian ship owner. I think that's a very good win-win kind of example that we have produced together, and very happy to see that there are more projects coming into Indian shipyards, where, of course, the Indian shipyard capacity is really, we're taking advantage of that, but we also, at the same time, we're also transferring the technology and bringing in the very top suppliers to the projects, and really sort of making Indian shipyards more competitive, I would say. So we need to take advantage of these good stories, and we need to communicate them. And I think also given that we also have a lot of good collaboration in the green energy space, like in renewable energy and in hydrogen, I think we also there we need to sort of break down silos and look towards the sort of the industries that have an interface with the green shipping space, right? Because if we are talking about, let's say, electrification of the short sea space, it's good to have like shore power, but it doesn't make any sense if the energy is coming, is produced through coal. So we need more renewable energy and more electrolyzers coming in to produce the future fuels like hydrogen and ammonia. So I would say that let's continue the dialogues that we have both on a G2G level, but also from the government side. Let's continue facilitate the dialogues on the industry level. So because there's where the traction is, right? So we can only from our side facilitate, and I think we are doing it quite well together with the Ministry of Port Shipping and Waterways, as well as also with the DG Shipping in Mumbai. So I think just to add also to what I've already said, I think that on the policy side, we're also having a lot of good conversations, and we also discussed this briefly before we stepped up here and in the, let's say, our own morning session in the meeting room. It's extremely important for us to get that knowledge out to the world also, because if we can duplicate policies, of course there's always some tweaking that needs to be done, because India needs also India-centric solutions. But I think that we have a lot to share, and it's already there and it's for free. So it's all about dialogue. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Christian. And maybe I'll circle back to you on some of those topics as well. Right. But yeah, I mean, one of the elements, of course, is also the technology aspect, which you touched upon, everyone touched upon, right? And we have a chief technology officer in the room, right, Mr. Manish. So it will be good to pick your brains on, from a sustainability and green shipping perspective, how do you see the technology evolving, both from the private sector and an overall ecosystem? And how do you see that landscape supporting this whole journey?
First of all, it's an honor to be part of the esteemed panel here. Thank you, Dhruv. While we are talking shipping here, but I'll take a larger landscape and say shipping and logistics, because they go hand in hand. And a lot of shipping is related to what happens on the land side. So there are three different aspects in which most of the innovation and technology is working at. The first aspect, obviously, is the scope 1 reduction in scope 1 emissions, where you electrify or whatever is diesel today. So whether it is the equipment, whether it is the automatic vehicles, or whether it is ship-to-shore power, automated mooring systems, and so on and so forth. One of the innovations which Rizwan mentioned in this line was the automated stacking solution, and which is being currently piloted in some of the countries in Middle East and Korea. Now that's a very big innovation that is going to add a lot of effect. The second aspect is the scope 2 emissions, where people have been talking about wind power, solar energy, but there's also some interesting work happening around wave energy, where it is believed that some of the geography, some of the seas provide enough wave electrical power. Now, if that could be harnessed, so there's a lot of work happening around scope 2 emissions. But I believe that the biggest innovation will be around the digitalization space. What is happening is that inefficiency in our systems is creating a lot of extraordinary carbon footprint. To take an example, one container move takes about 2.5 liters of diesel. Now, if that can be reduced to 1 liter of diesel or 1.5 liters of diesel, just simple efficiency to be built in. The average waiting time at our ports for a truck is 3 to 4 hours. Can that be reduced? So these are aspects where efficiency and digitalization will play an important role in reducing the scope 1 emissions. If we can do just-in-time kind of delivery of cargo, or if we can provide, even the waiting times for ship can be reduced, then you will automatically start seeing reduction in power. There are trade platforms, and the government of India has launched the Sagar Setu, which helps achieve those. Rizwan also mentioned something about the multimodal transport. That's another aspect where using technology, if you can do multimodal transportation, then you'll be able to provide the least carbon footprint-based movement. Finally, the advent of IoT and 5G. Now, while everyone is talking about 5G, one of the use cases for 5G is going to be using sensors, etc., to reduce inefficiency. So you will have fuel sensors, you will have tire pressure monitoring sensors, which will help reduce fuel consumption. You will also go slowly into digital twins for terminal operations, port operations, where you will be able to monitor, and what you monitor, you measure, and what you measure, you manage. So you will start monitoring, measuring, and managing your operations more effectively. So these are some of the aspects which I see from a technology point of view, Dhruv, which are going to take center stage.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, for shedding light on some of those specific aspects. And again, now coming to you, Mr. Hitesh, from a very port-centric perspective as well. I think we've talked a lot about shipping, but would also like your views on the port-centric aspects, right? ESG is high on the agenda, carbon neutrality, etc. What are the kind of specific initiatives which ports like yours globally are looking to take to really move up on that curve?
Thanks, Dhruv. Hi, everyone. So, rightly said, so ESG is really high on our agenda. And we try to ensure that how we internalize all the ESG parameters into each and every employee of our organization. Because until and unless I believe that every person imbibes those, follows in his life at work as well as his personal life beyond it, we won't have that multiplier effect. Specifically, internally, we have this ESG strategy and ESG framework. We call it Our World, Our Future. That strategy specifically talks about all the ESG parameters that we try to monitor, measure, improve upon with yearly targets for short term and long term. And few of the key targets that we have taken are obviously on the greening of energy, with the plan being for carbon neutral by 2040 and carbon net zero by 2050, an intermediate target of 28% reduction against the baseline by 2030. And we have been trying to green all the operations, few of the key aspects being how do we electrify most of our port equipment, right from RTGs to key cranes to material handling equipment, and then how do we source that electricity from green sources? It can be in-house solar panels that we have kind of installed at all the locations. We have just gone into a power purchase agreement for 2 of our terminals at Mumbai. So very soon we'll start getting green power for 2 terminals, which would kind of replace 75% of the gray electricity that we have. So similarly, we are trying to work on all of those things. And along with this green energy, we are also working on other aspects of sustainability and ESG, right from employee well-being to safety, and also the other softer aspects like air emissions, reduction of SOx, NOx, particulate matters and things like that. Keep measuring those, and how do we kind of eliminate, minimize all of those so that people working at our facilities, communities around, visitors and partners coming to our facilities, they are having minimal environmental impact with them. So those would be few of those.
Wonderful, thank you. So, what you heard right now, I think from the forum was a lot about what we are looking to do and in various directions, whether it's specifics or at a sectoral level. I think next few minutes, I would like to talk about how we are doing it, right? And maybe, Sir Lakshman, sir, I'll come back to you. I think there's been a lot of talk about ecosystem development, what specific players are trying to do. How is the government envisaging the involvement of private sector and also in incentivizing it, right? Like Mr. and I talked about, the ecosystem needs to be developed. It's not just one shipyard, right? It's so many different players. So how are you looking at incentivizing and making sure that the entire private sector kind of works on this journey?
So that's important. Essentially, like, we work as partners with the industry. So in our journey in the ports, like, that has been clearly, demonstrated, and it is one of the successful models that is there for everyone to see in terms of the public-private partnership. And so moving along those lines, like in terms of even the inland waterways, like what we are talking about in terms of green inland water vessels. So essentially, like, we are kind of developing a framework for all aspects of the ecosystem, like starting from, vessel design, the shoreside infrastructure, the transit-oriented development. So all of these pieces. So once we develop this framework, we are looking at, supporting it with appropriate funding, but essentially the implementation would be in partnership with the industry. So there is a huge opportunity for the people who are building such vessels to participate in this journey. And also we are looking at transport operators who can, own and kind of run these vessels in partnership with the state governments. So state government are also an essential piece of this ecosystem. So we are looking at passenger transport as well as cargo transport and tourism. So three pieces we are looking at. Essentially in all of this, there is a big role for the industry to play. And similarly, like when we talk about shipping, primarily the ship ownership, that's one space we are keen on supporting. There are a lot of initiatives in the pipeline, which I mentioned in the previous one. And also like Make in India in terms of the shipyards, the shipbuilding. So that's a space again where already there is a running shipbuilding financial assistance policy, which has a higher incentivization for greener vessel shipbuilding. But apart from this, we have recently had industry dialogue on the issues around financing of ship ownership, as well as like issues around shipbuilding and shipyards. So a lot of takeaways have come through from that discussion. So we are working on those. One of the key things which I mentioned was the Maritime Development Fund, MDF. That is going to be one of the key things that we are trying to put it across. And we have looked at countries like Norway, Korea, Japan, the ecosystems there, and what are the missing pieces in terms of support to the industry. For example, there is a buyer default cover, or there is an issue of a vendor default. So these are key things which actually like are missing, and probably like if that cover is given, then probably like even the financing institutions are still not fully like participating in financing the vessels, especially because of the infra status issue that also like we are working upon with the Ministry of Finance. So there are a lot of things which are we are trying to put it together so that like we have the ecosystem right and it is competitive globally, so that we are able to build for India and build for the world. And on the same lines, like the outer harbor project which recently got sanctioned for Tuticorin, that again is going to be on a PPP basis. And the other one, big one which is in the pipeline for sanction, which is in Maharashtra. So a lot of these projects, and one Galatia Bay. So these are the bigger projects which are lined up. So essentially in all of these, it's going to be in partnership with the industry.
Great. Thank you, sir. Thank you for, shedding light on so many specific initiatives which the government is considering in different forums. Mr. Nair, let me come to you again, right? In terms of, just you've been at the forefront of these technology changes and ownership. It'll be wonderful to understand from you, how this journey has been in terms of specific collaborations, right? And what could be learnings for not just your sector, but sector as a whole when you talk about technology collaborations globally or internally? If you could shed your light on that.
Dhruv, that's a very important point, and a part of that I touched upon on the hydrogen fuel cell vessel and what we have tried to collaborate with various partners within the country. But I would just to, since I feel there is a very, very important part without which nothing would move forward, whatever we talk, a few points, a few examples I would like to bring out. One, I just want to inform, we have conceived a autonomous vessel project. Now, we have secured our internal funding approvals. We are approaching the government to try and see whether a part of that can be taken by the government as a R&D initiative. But at the end of the day, what we are talking is it's autonomous surface vessels, end-to-end technologies, source code held within the country. Can we do it alone? We can't. So the framework is like we, as a platform integrator, we are actually collaborating with at least 2 labs of the DRDO. We have 2 of the Indian Institutes of Technologies involved. There's one leading IT major in India. There is a classification society involved. And then there are 7 startups involved. So I just want to say that this is how we actually even configured this particular model. And all going well, 24 months from now, we'll actually have this vessel. So this vessel would again be proving quite a lot of technologies. And it's not, at the end of the day, it's not building that vessel. When we're doing this, all these technologies will get mature. Because we are bringing in autonomy and insights already available in the automobile space. So we are trying to bring that into this space. So this is the kind of interdisciplinary aspects which we are trying to do. Another aspect, again, shipping is, we touched upon the Green Tug Transition Program. So Green Tug Transition Program, we are teaming up with one of the finest designers from Canada. We are building upon it. That designs, because it's not just that something which is just good for the rest of the world will work in India. So we are building upon it. There are at least 7 ports involved and detailed involvement with the ports. There are at least 2 leading private operators and Bakshi, JM Bakshi sitting next to us, like we are trying to get involved. Technology part, because when the Green Tug Transition Program happens, you need electrics, you need batteries, big time. So we are talking to people like Exide, Amar Raja and others. So this entire ecosystem is trying to be developed. And on one side, when we are doing this part, there are others also, the other shipyards also trying to work. The government is backing it up with a policy and a little bit of a nudge that this must be implemented, a little bit of a support that you do this, there's this kind of funding and support coming in. This is the ecosystem that's working. Third example is we have deployed a startup funding program. The initial corpus we have put in is 50 crore rupees. And again, we are very clear that we don't want to pick and choose in this. So IIT Madras is one of our implementing partners, and the Indian Institute of Management Kozhikode, who have got something called IMK Live. That's an accelerator. So we're going through them. And again, I want to, Lakshman is here. I always take this feel that because many people think that a PSU is an extended arm of the government. A PSU is an extended arm of the government from various points of view, but a PSU is a standing corporate. And for us, we don't have money to give out as charity or as grant because we are a commercial organization. But so within this entire 50 crore corpus, initial corpus, at least 60% of that is earmarked for way of equity investments. And we are talking. We have actually gotten our initial round of companies, and this is in the maritime space. So what I was just trying to bring out is, without agile, say, startups, small companies, which could actually be holding some core aspects, some large organization which has got global experience, international partners, this is the way to move forward. This is within the country. And just want to touch up internationally. Christian, good friend here, the way Cochin Shipyard, I just want to bring out what Cochin has tried to do with Norway. It's been now 22 years. Last 22 years, more than 150 organizations in Norway, and we have interacted. We've done more than 35 projects. And as we are speaking, there are at least 15 projects that's ongoing. And from the past and what we are trying to do today into the new energy space, new technologies, digitalization, we are strongly involved. And this again works on collaboration. See, Norway has got something called Innovation Norway across the world. And we were the first few companies in India which would receive this Innovation Norway, what do you call it, these groupings of 10 or 12 companies which will come for a sort of a Bharat Darshan kind of a thing. We would host them, we would interact with them. And this is actually led to a lot of insights. And it's not a one-way traffic, it's a two-way traffic. So this kind of involvement, today we are doing this with Norway, the new National Center of Excellence that's come up in Terry. We feel now the National Center of Excellence can be the core fulcrum to team up with various countries. Denmark, we are trying to team up. Denmark is already involved. Netherlands, Germany is trying to do something. So I think interdisciplinary models, a little bit of knowledge transfers within the country and internationally.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nair, for shedding light in such detail to kind of give that perspective of what all nuts and bolts are being put together to have initiatives, of this nature, with let's talk about sustainability, which is in any case at the forefront right now. And so new technologies keep evolving. And talking about, the knowledge discussions, etc. Mr. Christian, maybe I'll quickly come to you. Historically, we've talked about knowledge transfer, right? I think now, more importantly, we're talking about knowledge exchange, right? So in coming to specifics, what kind of knowledge exchange areas you find very promising when it comes to green shipping, green ports with India and Norway? And for that matter, if there are any other global examples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, thank you again for a good question. I think Madhu partly answered the question. Of course, we already have a lot of interesting collaboration in technologies and even business models in electrification and future fuels and digitalization, autonomy. But I think what is very promising, what I really like to see these days is how we're communicating with both industry and the government when it comes to facilitation of or having, bringing this sort of cluster mindset to India. And we had a delegation to Norway last year. It was in June when we were together in Norway, where we actually visited these so-called clusters that are not clusters on paper. These are actually physical clusters. These are port areas, industrial areas, where the different players across the value chain both share the cost for the infrastructure, but also work very transparently. I think there we have still a lot to share, and government has been very proactive and has sort of started that work. I think now we need to bring more industries or industrial players to Norway, and we also need to bring the Norwegian players to India to actually see the opportunities that are here to partner with other parts of the value chain. So I think there we have definitely something to scale. The second thing is I would say funding mechanisms. I think that there's a lot of funding available. We just need to, structure this in an adequate way so we can incentivize the industry, and we can also, lower the bar for execution of pilot projects and, and then subsequently larger projects. So I would say the cluster mindset and the cluster, systems that we have in Norway and the funding mechanisms, I think that these are two areas where we still have a lot of potential. So, but I'm quite sure that we will get there. We're already starting.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Mr. Christian. And very quickly, Mr. Manish, coming to you, right? It would be good also to understand from the private side perspective as well. I think when Mr. Nair, of course, talked about is that what are the kind of specific initiatives which you are looking at, and from what kind of support areas do you envisage the ecosystem, not just the government, but the others to also provide for those kind of initiatives?
Yeah, so if you look at inward looking, so there are a couple of initiatives like electrification of all our diesel equipment. That's the easy, low-hanging fruit. But we're also looking at it as from a policy framework perspective that going in the future, all our equipment will only be electric equipment. So that takes care of it. Besides that, I think what Hitesh mentioned, we also have signed an agreement with the Kandla port, a PPA agreement for wind power. The idea is to get into more such kind of agreements. So that's from an inward looking point of view. But if I go a step ahead from an ecosystem point of view, we're talking with a lot of our customers to try and create a green truck environment for the long haul and as well as the short haul. And that just doesn't mean electrification, but also going into the details of how the battery life can be increased. That's an important aspect because you don't want to keep charging the batteries again and again. So that's the second aspect. The third aspect, which I spoke about briefly, was the digitalization aspect, where efficiency comes into the system to reduce wastage. So while we work with the government of India for the Sagar Setu project, I'm also happy to advise that we work with the government of or Kingdom of Saudi Arabia the Mawani ports for creating an ecosystem, a digital ecosystem which they currently use for bringing efficiency into their ecosystem. So their fuel wastage gets reduced drastically. JM Bakshi has also gone ahead and created, or what do you say, science-based targets. So we are the first logistics company to be validated our science-based targets for reduction of scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% in the next 10 years. And scope 3 emissions by 70% in the same time frame. So we are the first Indian company to have been validated by the Science Based Target Association. So those are the various aspects that we've been working on. Besides the other low-hanging fruits are all our warehouses by default have solar power panels. So there are no more aluminium, no more asbestos, nothing, just solar power. So those are simple aspects which we have been doing.
Thanks, Mr. Manish, for shedding light on the specific initiatives which private sector companies like yours are also undertaking to take that journey. And quickly, finally, just coming to you, Mr. Hitesh, you look at HSE as a whole, right? Within the ESG, of course, HSE is also a very, very critical component and for the ports itself. So how do you look at the trends shaping up on the HSE aspect? Because having a sustainable maritime future, which is the title, HSE becomes a very core to that. So how do you see that shaping up?
So, rightly said, Dhruv. So, we are looking at technology, digitization, how do we kind of foster a culture of innovation and utilize all of these aspects to improve HSE angle as well. So, obviously, large part of E is overlapped with sustainability, that anyways goes without saying. The second S, again, once we optimize all of these operations using automation and everything, it also helps big time in safety of people. Right. For example, if we are trying AGVs at our Dubai terminals. In case those are successful, we take away all the unsafe behaviors of 100, 200, 500 truckers who are running the trucks, and we are only dependent on the wisdom of the truck operator. He might be sleepy, he might not have good sleep, whatsoever. So we are trying to utilize all of these technology, digital twin, I think he spoke about, to improve our HSE parameters all along. Similarly, for example, we couple of times spoke, Rizwan spoke, Manish spoke about the highway storage that we are trying at South Korea. Now, once that is completely successful, in the single unit, it would reduce 350,000 moves, unproductive moves for picking the containers. Now, just imagine once we are removing all of those unproductive moves, we are ensuring the well-being of people, safety of people, plus obviously reduce energy consumption and becoming the operations more environment friendly. So those would be few of them.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Hitesh. Yeah, so, and thank you for the entire panel to be, very crisp in their answers, to give us time for, some audience questions as well. So I'll right now open the floor for any audience questions. Yes, please.
This is a question from Mr. Lakshmanan. I am S.K. Sumi, retired general manager from the railways. So it was heartening to learn that the first hydrogen fuel cell vessel has been launched in Cochin shipyard. What are the plans for the next 1 year? How many more hydrogen fuel cell vessels can we see being launched?
So currently, after the first vessel, we are looking at, sanctioning a few more vessels for NW1. So I think maybe in a couple of months, we should have the orders for the next 4 or 5 vessels. So whatever is the production cycle time, I think, CSL can come in. So that's the immediate pipeline that we are looking at.
Yes, please.
Excuse me. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Tushar Agarwal, and I'm into steel supplying by the name Shri Ashoka Metals. I just want a briefing about how an entrepreneur like R, who's into affiliated industry like steel, can make a venture, and which industry or which government sector to touch fast for the reconciliation information. to get on board of this green shipping and ship vessel making? If anyone can take my question.
Like from, I think one touch point could be the DG shipping, who is like, the Director General of Shipping. So they are the nodal for running this current, shipbuilding financial assistance policy. So I think their website has details and they have a nodal officer for running this program. So that is, one, and Cochin Shipyard as one of the leading players in this segment. So they could also be of help.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, I think he had.
I have also a question for Mr. Lakshman. This is with respect to the sustainability of the cost of shipping operations. Like all the raw materials and finished goods what we move throughout the country, as per the national logistics policy, our logistics cost is in double digit, that is 14 to 15%, which we are striving to bring to 8 to 9%. That is the whole cost. Now for that, I think the maximum goods movement is through roads, still not by rail and shipping. Now, if the shipping share is increased, perhaps logistic cost can be increased. So can you give us an idea that how much is the extent of movement we are doing by ships or maritime operations or this one, and as compared to rail and road, what cost effects are there, and any other initiatives which the government is taking in this regard?
So the primary objective of national logistics policy is what you stated. So this is a multi-sectoral, approach, which has elements of rail, elements of road, and elements of maritime or water. So within the government, the overall, push is like how efficient can the roads be and how, less costly can the road transport be. That is one aspect which government is working on. Second is how can the share of railways go up, because that is, cheaper as compared to the roads. So there's a lot of investment going into that as well. And third is like the water transport, of course, the cheapest of the three. Currently, like we are at 5 to 6% of modal share. And we are looking at increase.
What is the present load, what we are sending and what?
Present is 5 to 6%.
5 to 6% only.
Yeah, that is right.
And this is the cheapest one. I'm told one.
Million,
if you, 1 ton of goods, if you send it by rail, road, this month, the ratio is somewhere 2.5, 2 rupees and 1 rupee.
There are different data points. Of course, it is the cheapest. So there are a lot of efforts to, improve it. For example, like if you go back a few years, this was hardly like 2 to 3%. So currently, like, we have kind of doubled that. And we are looking at further doubling it and taking it to 12% maybe in the long term. So this is the, overall targets that we have. And in terms of promoting coastal shipping, so we are looking at a, VGF kind of a model where we can promote coastal shipping, which is, being put together. And in terms of promoting cargo in the waterways, in the last, I think 5 years, we are seeing a CAGR of around 20%. So there is a, consistent effort in terms of improving the fairway, building more riverine terminals, and partnering with private and improving the waterway operations for cargo, especially like currently we are running a couple of processes. One for the Maharashtra waterways, where there is a PPP, bid which is floated for Amba and Dharmadar Creek, couple of ones, and we are preparing a DPR for developing the NW64 and NW5, which is connecting the Talcher industrial belt to Paradeep and Dhamra port.
Yeah.
So currently the DPR is underway. So if this project, we are pushing it, maybe it may take 6 more months for us to sanction it and come to the market. So these are, some of the specific initiatives that we have, but the larger, objective and target is like, to take the current 5-6% to 12%.
Thank you, sir. Just last question, okay. I think we have.
So my question to Mr. Nair. Mr. Nair, congratulations first for putting up India's first hydrogen-fueled vessel in your shipyard. In fact, it is aligned with the international effort. As you know, the first methanol-fueled vessel has just sailed off from Ulsan. So this shows India's commitment to net zero efforts globally we all are doing. So my question to you is, sir, whether this boat will be continuously on fuel cell operation or just for a pilot test? And then what is the source of your hydrogen?
See, the vessel will be continuously on a fuel cell. It's got, technically, it's got 5 cylinders which can store a 350 bar, it can store 40 kilograms of hydrogen, and that is good for 8 hours run. The vessel is going to be deployed, the first vessel will be deployed after about a month of operational, like a data collection in Cochin, we'll deploy it in Varanasi. So the vessel is fully hydrogen, and it's got batteries, but then there's nothing else on there's no diesel, there's no generator on the ship. Now, where the fuel has come from, right now the fuel is just sourced from hydrogen suppliers, but, and it's a temporary cassette-based arrangement. But in Varanasi, the intent is to have one of the leading energy suppliers to deliver green hydrogen produced at source with an electrolyzer, but that's the intent.
Thank you, Mr. Nair, and I'm sure there are a few more questions, but I think in the interest of time, we will now bring this session to the close. I think some of the members will be around, so please feel free to reach out to them. Thank you again to all the panelists for a very engaging discussion. I hope there were some very good takeaways for all the members in the audience as well. Back to you, Komal.
Thank you so much, speakers. Thank you, Dhruv. Major takeaways, collaboration. We need collaboration. That's the need of the hour. Green Transition Program is going to play a very important role going forward. And there is a need to develop an entire ecosystem. Funding a mechanism is definitely something that we need to look at. And of course, global knowledge transfers and exchange. That's what we need. So thank you so much. I will just request our speakers for a group photograph. And we do not have any break. We will just request all the delegates to kindly be seated. We will just take 2 to 3 minutes for housekeeping change. And we'll continue with the next session for the program. Ladies and gentlemen, after key deliberations on key initiatives, vision and innovation for maritime sustainability, we are here today to start our next session, that is the panel discussion on green technologies and clean fuels for long-term decarbonization of the maritime sector. The session is focusing on how do we achieve the objectives for the long-term decarbonization of the maritime sector. And I'm pleased to have on the stage Mr. Narendra Goyal, President, Green Ammonia Business, Avada Group, Mr. Ur Aipik, Head of Strategy and New Business Development from Statcraft. We have Mr. Hiren Mehta, Chief Commercial Officer and Vice President, Business Development from Acme Group. Mr. Madhvendra Singh, CEO from Gujarat Maritime Cluster. Mr. Ajay Kumar Singh, Head of Section, DNV Maritime Advisory, India. And we also have Ms. Madan McLean, Secretary General, Zero Emission Ship Technology Association, who has joined us virtually today. Very welcome to all our panelists. And we have the moderator of the session, Ms. Shruti Arora, Director, Transport and Logistics Sustainability, PwC. Over to you, Shruti. And I'm sure you will be able to manage the time well and the session absolutely well. All the best.
Yeah, thank you. I think Dhruv has set a very long task, tough order for me for doing that previous session very well. So very good afternoon to all of you and to the panelists. So we've heard a lot about, greening of the maritime sector in terms of the various initiatives on the port side, on the vessel side, on the shipping side, the fuel, the technology, and right from digital aspects right down to operations, etc. We'll try and focus this session primarily on the technology aspects. What are the new innovative technologies that are coming in terms of fuel or practices, etc.? What are the collaborations that are happening? What are the international experiences that we are seeing and the developments that are happening? And a little bit, what is the outlook of the Indian industry? And just what are the asks and how we can set a roadmap to make this a fruitful journey for all of us. At the beginning, we have, I'd like to start with Ms. Madan McLean, who's, with us online from Zestas. Ma'am, I would like to start with you, and if you can just give, you're heading this task of, zero emissions ship technology, which is of great interest, and not just centrally, but globally, and you're coordinating probably a lot of efforts. So if you could just share your outlook on how you've seen this transition happening and where do you see this going, a little bit of that. That would help us set the context of a global outlook and outreach. That'd be helpful to us.
Thank you for the opportunity. Namaste, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. We're at a very different place now than we were a year ago, and for the decades leading up to this energy transition. I think that we all know that the IMO agreed the initial greenhouse strategy just over 5 years ago. Last year, in July, we agreed to the revised strategy, which really, I'll not go into the details of it, but I can say that it really then spells the end of fossil fuel in shipping by 2040. So although the technology was technically ready in 2020, 2019, 2020, now we have policy behind us, and so this is really pushing the technology forward. We are now beginning to see major projects using absolute zero emission technologies. Example being the Samskip, a vessel that's being built in Cochin shipyards right now.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that's helpful, and we see that, as we heard in the earlier session also, technology, policy, and the capacity of the resources. I think these are the key driving factors of this entire transition that is required for this sector to be able to achieve net zero emissions. From here, I would like to just take on to Mr. Narendra Goyal, who's heading the green ammonia business, on how he sees technology that has transitioned, especially in these alternate fuels, and how do you see that going? The technology, and if you could just look at, just cover a little bit of the policy aspect, which is driving, as Madhav just mentioned as well.
Thank you, Sharuti. Good morning, everyone. Briefly, I will tell about Avada Energy, group which I represent here as a business head for green ammonia. Avada is a leading renewable energy generator in India, close to 4.4 gigawatt production as of today, generation as of today, and aiming to be 11 gigawatt by 2026. Along with, we are setting up multiple projects to manufacture green hydrogen and ammonia and green methanol. So, Shruti, back to your question. In fact, I had more than 30 years of experience in ammonia manufacturing in Indian fertilizer industry. So I can very well assure the team here that India is having right skill set to make these green fuels. We are the second largest manufacturer of ammonia today. So that means technologies are well established to make ammonia, and in a very efficient and safe manner. World's most efficient ammonia plant is today located in central India in a private sector fertilizer company. Regarding hydrogen production through green route, through water electrolysis, is also a established technology. Water electrolysis in form of brine solution electrolysis is being used for many, many years by caustic industry to make caustic soda. The only application is that we are shifting it to produce hydrogen here, where the reasons for electrolysis in caustic plants are different products. So the only pathway where we are as a community, world community, is working to improve the efficiencies, to improve the flexibility, to cope up with the renewable energy profile. As you know, the example I said where the electrolysis is happening, maybe the grid power is being used for supply source. But whereas now we have to depend on the solar power in India, and wind, unfortunately, we don't have like European Union. So we are working to design the systems which can support the solar power on round the clock basis. So this is the only development area. Otherwise, technologies are right in place for making green hydrogen, which is the clean fuel for future, including for marine industry. Thank you.
Thank you. And as you say, in terms of when we're saying we have the technology and we have the resources, etc., Hiren, I would like you to speak to you. If you can say, while we have the source, it's very important to have the entire ecosystem in place to be able to reach the supply and meet the demand supply side of it. So it's not just producing it, it is ensuring that it is available in the right manner, form, etc., the entire distribution network, etc. So how do you see that panning out? And you've worked with LNG and the other sectors in terms of the maritime. So if I look at from maritime or any other perspective also, how do you see that not just production, how do we link it up to the entire ecosystem as well? If I'll just skip to Hiren and then come back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Shruti. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Shruti. Myself, Hiren Mehta, working with ECME Group as Chief Commercial Officer, and ECME Group also is a leading renewable energy company. We are having nearly 5.5 gigawatt renewable power portfolio, and since last 2 years, we are running a proof of concept, fully integrated green ammonia plant in Rajasthan, in Bikaner, perhaps first in the world. And we're also setting up 3 large-scale green ammonia project in one in India, one in Oman, and one in US. So Shruti worked with the LNG industry for nearly 23 years and looked at how the LNG also has become the shipping fuel. It's not only a production of that fuel, but it is very, very important to have how entire ecosystem develops it. And very encouraging things which I would like to say here in terms of the ammonia, that all the players in this sector who are working towards making these ecosystems work. As an example, producers like Acme, Avada, and many others, engine designer and manufacturer like MAN and Wärtsilä, IHI. These all people have started working at least 4 to 5 years back. And as we speak today, they have done the demonstration of those engines. And they have also worked in some of the vessels work for certain hours in sea. As we speak today, number of vessels on the ammonia fuel already been ordered under manufacturing, and there are many more are expected to. Other than ammonia, methanol also has been seen as one of the fuel which will certainly help in the energy transition and reduction in the carbon emission. So policy framework is also going to play very, very important part, while it is now more or less clear that what is green based on the policy or regulation what we have in Europe. It's called RFNBO, but at the same time on the maritime sector also certain policies which will drive how it would be changing the scenario in terms of bunkering of such fuels, and most importantly on the HSEC, because what work going on this point in time is to how to handle the fuel like ammonia, which is toxic in nature. While many other fuels have been managed and handled, I have no doubt about that. It can also not be managed, but only thing is there has to be some policy framework, safety guideline has to be placed how to handle this fuel. Thank you, Shruti.
Great. Very important, while we have the infrastructure and the manufacturing capacity, etc., it is very important that the industry needs to be ready to use it, which is where you're talking about the engines, which is you're talking about the supply chain, the HSE parts of it. And Rizwan spoke earlier about, it's not really feasible to retrofit everything. It's a new order pipeline. And then we see, while these timelines, as Madad was saying, the timelines are being set for net zero 2040. That means the shipyards and the entire pipeline has to be ready. So while we're talking about this, it's very important for us to give due weightage to the massive issues that we are solving for 2040. It's not just one piece that we need to solve. It's the entire collaborative effort of the sector. And for that, Madhu, I'd like to bring that you're heading the maritime cluster, one of the first, and we heard about what clusters have done in Norway. So in terms of what is the vision of maritime cluster in bringing various technologies, capacities, capabilities, and what are the efforts that as a cluster you're doing? That'd be helpful.
Thank you, Shruti. See, in my observation and understanding of this whole sector, what I feel is while much of the focus is on the green fuels, I think that's only part of the problem. As I see, in fact, statistics speak for themselves. And though I understand that statistics can be used to guide your narrative, but while we say so, if we look at the total carbon emissions which the shipping industry is basically contributing is 3%. And within this 3%, it is mind-boggling to understand that 30 to 40% of this carbon emission from the shipping industry is only because of inefficiencies. Are we looking at that inefficiency part of it? So that's where, as the cluster, we have within our member base have been speaking to the ship chartering companies, the owners and the new builds. You'll be surprised to know that freight rates in last 1 week or 2 weeks have gone up 25%. That's because the whole confusion which the green fuel is creating in the shipping industry is that nobody is placing new build orders. Because ships have life of 25, 30 years, there is no standardization around the world as to what is the future fuel for the shipping industry. Whether it's green hydrogen, whether it's ammonia, it's ethanol. EU was going gung-hos about the biofuels, but when they came out with the EU ETS policy, the biofuel was completely missing. So having said that, when we talk about efficiency, that's also divided into two parts, and I'm very glad that the subject matter of this discussion is covering both the aspects, that is shipping as well as ports. So when it comes to the inefficiency among the ships, You know, I come from a naval background and we have been sailing on ships. And there's something called as the critical speed. Just two aspects of ships, the speed and the HVAC operations. The speed, the critical speed, once you are sailing below the critical speed, I mean, the emissions are almost, it's a linear graph where the excess ratios is pretty nice. But the moment you go beyond the critical speed, the emissions are actually an exponential curve. So that is why there is a guidelines internationally that you should try and maintain the constant speed. Plan your voyages. Captains have been requested to plan your voyages in time. Don't rush. So that is combined, if HVACs and the speeds if combined together, can you imagine, brings down the emissions by 30%. That's pretty, good. Then we talk about the amount of idle ballast which is lying on the high seas. It's anybody's guess. Just talk about the Indian ports. We have much of the import-oriented cargoes, but there's hardly any export-oriented cargoes. There's idle ballast which is moving out of India, lying on the high seas. Nobody knows the visibility into these assets and resources which are available. And I'm very proud to say is that part of the research center that we are establishing, we are accelerating one startup that have been recently incubated also by the Techstars in US, which is a NASA-funded organization, the first organization to go there, and have also won the defense startup programs both in Asia as well as in US. That's a company which is based out of Gujarat, Ahmedabad. We are accelerating. They are into the first of its kind launch-on-demand maritime satellite network, ready to use, which the first prototype is being launched in July. This is going to give us a complete visibility into all the assets at sea as well as the ports, give us the important aspect about the carbon neutrality and the net zero targets that we're trying to establish is also to identify the sources. Though we are talking about bringing net zero commitments, though India has not signed the 45 commitment and there is a complete divide in the global north and the south, where the technology is not coming to us because we are a developing country, the investors are also pulling off. But when it comes to the overall visibility into the resources, at least in the ports and ships, so this maritime satellite can actually tell us exactly that. Also, the GHG accountability, that exactly tell us that, for example, the RTG crane on a port is emitting what amount of carbons in 1 hour of an operation. I don't think any of the ports have actually come down to those kind of figures. So this kind of GHG accountability is also very, very important. So when we come to the ships, these satellite images can tell us that what kind of emissions are being done by which ship, what are the ships available at idle ballast, what are the resources available at ports, and also when the whole supply chain is looked at one entity, that's also very important. We talk about multimodal and efficient, and not only efficient but resilient supply chains, which actually talks about end-to-end visibility into the whole supply chain. So that's where the integrated maritime exchange that we are talking about, which does the ship fixing on a digital mode, because now it's all being managed by ship management companies and technical management companies, ship fixers, brokers, which actually don't have the complete visibility of the spectrum. But this kind of a maritime exchange can actually give into visibility of every IMO registered vessel. So those are the kind of new things that we are trying to do. Also, we just try to identify that we did a case study where we identified a ship which will migrate or transition to the green fuel. And if at all, with the fossil fuel arrangements that we have while in the transition stage, what is the amount of emissions it will have if the ship was at anchorage for 30 days? All efforts that you do in bringing down the carbon emissions of the whole 12 months would go down the drain if the ship was at anchorage for 30 days. So that's, the kind of things. You see the Paradip port. If you do the Google Earth scan on your own, you will realize there's kilometers long of trail of trucks which is standing at the port where the ships don't arrive just in time. So again, that kind of connecting the digital resources, digitally is very, very important. If you see now coming to the ports part of it, again, DP World has done a study, they've published it also, which gives out just one factor. If we digitalize the customs part and the port clearances part, it can bring up the efficiency by 73% or 67%. And I'll also add immigration to it, that will bring up the efficiency to almost 80%. I wonder what's stopping us from doing that digitalization part. That's a low-hanging fruit. I think we should immediately be doing that, at least at the ports. Now, when, of course, the port operations, the kind of cargo handling equipment which is being used, the kind of cranes and everything, one has to start migrating. That's pretty small thing to do actually. That can be done immediately. At least those things can be electrified immediately. We can identify what kind of vessels are being done. If you are ordering new kind of equipment, that should be completely electric in nature. And of course, when it comes to the source of generation of this electricity, that all ports must be electrified. In fact, while I was in the Navy almost 10 years back, we were talking about electrifying all our ports. And then the source of this electrification should also be green. Any ship which comes alongside must not be running its own power. That's the objective. I think those are the considerations that we can make.
No, very valid, and I think you further enhanced on the aspects that were discussed. Digitalization, I think Manish from JM Bakshi had mentioned that how they are taking those efforts, and especially the trucks that are waiting outside posts. That's a major cause, and I think from DP World also you had mentioned that how you're actually optimizing the moves per hour, and that can save a lot of energy efficient. Energy consumption, fuel consumption, etc. So a lot of innovative powers, and I think the government of India is also that's why pushing, setting up these targets for the ports to shift to renewable energies, etc. And which is also very important. So not while we're just talking about green of ammonia, green hydrogen, but there are other forms which are also readily available. We heard about offshore wind farms. I think that's another aspect that needs to be tapped about. With this, Ajay, if you could also just throw some light in terms of the technology for any aspects that are being looked at, which can be propagated, etc., in this transition, etc. So it's not just one effort that we see on various aspects that multiple efforts across disciplines need to be taken. So
thanks, Shruti. Yeah. So this is Ajay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is I'm from DNV, and thanks for the question. To go ahead with this, there are different technologies in the maritime sector for reducing the emissions, basically. Number one could be, I would say, digitalization for route optimization. You can reduce the speed, you can optimize the route, basically, so that you have a less emissions. Of course, alternative fuels, talking about the green ones, which is green hydrogen, green ammonia, biofuels, which are the more relevant towards the greening side of it. And then we have, of course, LNG as well, but then I'm talking more on the greening side. Then we have cold ironing for the ports, basically, which is not using the auxiliary power of the engine, but using the electricity from the port. We also have battery operated vessels. A good example in India, which is KMRL. DNV did the consultancy for them as well. So that is classed with DNV as well in the same part. So these are some of them, I would say. And then if you see this Harit Sagar guideline from the government, they have put it 3 phases into it, and saying that first will be in 2023, the port craft should be have to be into greener side, and then Indian Navy vessels, and then the EXIM vessels, which is the merchant vessels. So there are initiatives going on, and some of them which I mentioned you about the technologies, as well as I want to include here, there are different options as well as hydrodynamics, hull cleaning, optimizing the design, basically. There could be machinery part of the vessel. There is CCUS, which is carbon capture, usage and storage. So there are different technologies in the industry, I'm talking about the maritime perspective, which should be taken into consideration.
Right. Oh, thank you. And while you say that, it's all the technologies, because shipping sector itself is so diverse. If you're looking at the maritime, I'm not just looking at the long voyage or the long haul. There is a lot of this short sea shipping, a lot of coastal movements. We're looking at inland waterway movements. And if you could throw some lights, because Norway has been one of the front runners, and we've heard a lot of collaboration between India and Norway, and as an organization also, you're one of the largest renewable energy suppliers. So if you could throw some light on how this transition has helped and how you've seen the change in the industry, that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. I'll throw some light and give some experiences from Europe or Norway. But I mean, I would also like to make a note that Norway is tiny compared to India. So I think the energy transition, or in general, the move from fossil-based fuels to green alternatives, and that transition in India is probably one of the largest, if not the largest itself. So in general, I find it actually quite, it's quite challenging to discuss it, maybe for the entire country, because it's just too large. So that's why, I think some of the schemes like Gujarat Maritime Cluster, I mean, I've been following them very closely. Like, it's quite important to start with. I mean, I can give some of my personal experience from actually this port electrification, because this was something that actually started so many years ago in Norway, and it was a government kind of driven program. And the idea was, again, there was a regulation in Norway that you have to power, like if a ship is basically bunkering or if a ship is like offloading goods, and so they have to be electrified. And that actually meant, like, you know, the ships have to be slightly different. They can't use their diesel generator, but also the port had to upgrade their facilities, you know, and the ports are not made for power generation. I mean, you have very tiny space, and most of the time, even the grid companies had to change because you don't have, I mean, you don't plan the ports in a way that they need to provide the power. So it was a cascading effect in a way. Like, I mean, that's why I think some of like my industry colleagues here said you really need to think the ecosystem. How is the vessel gonna do it? How is the port gonna do it? And then how will also the grid companies even help in this transition? So it's a problem that actually involves everyone. And that's why I think, again, I just go back, sometimes I mean, the clusters or like, let's say, local level organizations like Gujarat Maritime Cluster is quite important because it's too difficult for someone to understand every nitty-gritty of port or the vessel or the power company to understand from a distance. And that's number one. Number two, like, I think when it comes to this, like fuels, again, in Norway, there was a significant government push to use or to experiment with some of the like electric vessels, which are actually manufactured in Cochin as well. So these are autonomous electrical ferries that basically go from one side of the, let's say, fjord to another side and come back. It took a while. I mean, it didn't happen over a day. It takes time, and it was not that cheap. But it happens. And again, if I compare today, like what is the cost of electricity, let's say in India, if you were to use your diesel generator, I guess like 16, if it's kind of for a mobile application, and the power for that will be a fraction of that. So in a way, there is, I think, a cost already in some parts. You can make it happen, cost competitive. The tricky part is really when it comes to when you want to do more, like methanol or ammonia, where, for example, in methanol, I think at least the e-methanol or the green alternative is double. And I think in ammonia, at least where we work, the cost is also double, like when we say green methanol versus gray methanol, if not triple in Norway, in general, in Europe. So in that case, I mean, it's still, there is some, how can I say, for example, positive signs in Denmark, like where there was the first e-methanol auction. And actually, the company who was winning it, they got it pretty much like, they don't need too much subsidy that they claim, let's see. So what I mean to say, I think the examples that I see in Norway or in Europe are promising, but they're quite stepwise and they need to address the entire ecosystem. And I think they try to do it at the local level as much as possible. And again, like for the futuristic alternatives like methanol or like ammonia, I think there are promising signs, but I think that will take a bit more time. And then for that, I think the cost cap has to be slightly reduced. I mean, it's impossible to force someone to buy double or triple the cost of the alternative.
No, very true. And Madad, I'd like to bring you in over here when we're talking about, you know, this transition, and you're right at the center of it, and you hear a lot of voices. This transition is obviously coming at a cost, right? And how do you see that? What is the outlook of the industry in terms of how geared up they are, maybe technically, because we're looking at all these vessels being transitioned, and there is a cost of transitioning, there is a cost of fuel. So is there a perspective that is being built up, or it's more driven by the need to reduce emissions? What is the driving factor over here? It could help us, just understand that.
So, yeah, I think at the moment, as being spoken about my colleague, by my colleagues, there's still a lot of uncertainty, and that driving force is still a long way off. Well, not a long way off, but it's not upon us yet. You know, we will be discussing the basket of measures to support the revised strategy going forward, but these won't come into effect until 2027 at the soonest, and some may be coming in later. So in terms of this pressure at a global scale, and you know, as has been said earlier, I just want to come back to a few points that were raised by my esteemed colleagues on the panel. And first of all, is this, you know, our first gains, when we're looking at achieving those emissions reductions going toward 2030, we really need to be looking at efficiencies. Absolutely, we need to be looking at efficiencies. And those efficiencies will come from, yes, they will come from, you know, shifting our operation profiles. That is the real low-hanging fruit. But then, you know, a more efficient vessel design, but that then requires a new build. So retrofitting wind propulsion technology is a way of adding efficiencies without having to go into the new build. That one of the things that we are going to be facing for some time ahead, this fuel uncertainty. It's, you know, we're seeing studies coming out that are saying that there's no way that we will have enough green methanol for the industry. There's also a question about when ammonia vessels will, you know, when will that technology actually be ready? I'm hearing 2027 for internal combustion engines, but then, you know, when that uncertainty is there, we can't put a date on it. We can't say it will be ready at this point in time. So I think that what we really need to focus on now is the two low-hanging fruits. One is on a technological level now is data. I think you know, absolutely we can create huge efficiencies by moving forward with data. That's something that we can do today, and it's not, you know, it's not a huge cost. And data, and this brings me back to the ecosystem. That if we're operating in ecosystems, we can then begin to use this data to make the entire ecosystem more efficient. And that's between and that really is a joined up between ports and vessels. So not only just in time, but also, you know, everything to do with timing on bunkering and timing and the whole you know, the offloading and customs, and you know, all of these things can be made much more efficient, as our colleagues have said, through efficiencies. But then I want to come back to where we can get big wins now. And this is the technology, the hard tech, is that, you know, we're talking about, in the previous panel, we're talking about inland shipping, we're talking about coastal shipping. We can get to absolute zero in those operating profiles now. You know, I'm listening to my colleagues talking about, you know, the levels of, you know, the gigawatts of renewable energy. You know, we can, I think, focus on, and I'm talking globally here, not just India. Globally, if we capture that low-hanging fruit of short sea shipping, coastal vessels, and inland vessels, we will begin to push forward the technology. We're already seeing fuel cells. There's several vessels in build that have more than 6 megawatts of hydrogen fuel cell capacity. And we know, by the way, things are improving. If we're building 6 megawatts now, in very short order, we'll be building 12 megawatts. And that pretty much covers the power requirements for coastal vessels. So in conclusion, during this time of uncertainty, until we actually have the market-based measure coming out of the IMO and the revised strategy coming out of the IMO, if we focus on that low-hanging fruit, we'll lay the foundations to move forward rapidly when those new regulations come in. And that, coming back to your question about cost, is the two things. One is that by focusing on efficiencies, we reduce costs immediately, because efficiencies mean less fuel. Fuel is the biggest cost in any ship owner's bottom line. And then as well by ports and vessel owners and all the stakeholders in the supply chain moving forward where it is possible now, they've set themselves up to be in that first mover position when these new regulations and market-based measures come through. So they will be the ones in a position to get the first gains out of those economic measures that will be coming through. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I think wonderful insights coming out there. We can't tackle the entire problem right now. And how do we break it into short steps, and the low-hanging fruits, efficiency definitely being one of them. And then obviously, even in the shipping sector, as we can break it up into ferries, the inland waterways, the coastal shipping, and then look at efficiencies in the long-haul vessels, etc. I'm glad that you brought out the uncertainty aspect, which is what, there is a driving force, there is a commitment, and we see the policy also moving all this thing together. But yet there is this cloud of uncertainty. And Narendraji, I'd like if you could throw some light on how does the industry, or you're grappling with this uncertainty aspect of it, right?
So thank you. Very good discussion today. I could hear Madhav Energy telling some points. With your permission, I like to mention here that yes, it's transition to green fuels. Transition means a lot of roadblocks. We all together have to come over those roadblocks, because we as a humanity don't have any other option rather than to decarbonize this planet. Otherwise, our lives are very small as compared to the life of this planet. It may not be livable if we continue the way we are emitting 3.8% by whole marine industry. It's not a short number. 3.8 seems to be short, but it is not short in terms of carbon tonnage. So when it is transition, that means all of us, each one of us, including the states, have to move forward to facilitate. Lenders have to support green fuel projects as well as vessels, as the earlier session was discussing about the funding of green vessels. Today, I have not come across any lender who is going for soft conditions. They all are comparing with the conventional technology-based projects. So had it been conventional, we would not have been discussing this. So governments are proposing to support, but lenders are not coming forward. That is one which I will request as a matter of policy. Then our national government is pushing hard for this transition, even though we are a still developing country, but we want to be along with the global community to achieve decarbonization. That is why I was congratulating Mr. Nair that we are not second to, we are at par with the efforts globally. So that means our governments have to encourage ports. They have identified 3 ports as a hydrogen hub, but we have to fast go and to create bunkering facilities on these ports to support fuel availability to the vessels, as EMA is doing in Singapore. They are the first to come over with this kind. So we need to go forward. As far as green methanol, this is, I feel, it's my personal view, is a short-term low carbon fuel. Ultimately, we have to go based on the zero carbon fuel, which is green hydrogen. And the cost, I assure you all, 15 years ago, India was producing power 17 rupees a unit, 18 rupees a unit. Today, we are the lowest in world with few cents, or in Indian currency, 2.5 rupees a unit. So in fact, it's very heartening when I meet my colleagues from European Union and they want to know how India could achieve this number reduction. There is no magic, in fact. Of course, efficiency improvement is a job of engineers. We continue to do that. But it's a scale of economics. Our government could impose the mandate of 30% renewable energy purchase obligation to the entire industry. So that brought in the scale to India and that led to the cost reduction. I'm sure the same experiment will happen with the green hydrogen and green ammonia fuel cost. I'm very sure. I'm into the industry for more than 32 years. I assure you that ammonia industry in India is well established. We can reduce cost. We can reduce cost provided there are the off-takers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's again the chicken and egg story. Where is the offtake and there is the technology aspect. Hiren, coming to you again, the aspects of uncertainty, since you're also coming from that side, and you've seen the journey in other fuels, etc. So in terms of how do you see that the industry is geared up, or what is it that the industry would need as a support mechanism? Yeah.
I would like to start with a small statement which I saw in the last COP28. It was written that time of announcement has gone and the time of action has come now. What does it mean? Say that why we all congratulate Mr. Nair or people congratulate us? Because it is very important to take a small steps by everyone in the ecosystem. Uncertainty is what? Uncertainty is that's something human being doesn't know, and it will never know until they will gather some experience by taking a small step. I totally agree with what my industry colleague Mr. Goyal said that yes, cost is in it. Cost has to be looked at, but cost is not only aspect. Engineers are working. What is the cost? Cost is nothing but whatever the renewable resources available is available. You can't make sun more shine. You can only improve on the technology. That work is going on, and in the renewable fuel, everyone is very confident based on what work is going globally that cost is going to come down. Whether it will come down in 3 years or in 5 years, but it will. A very important aspect is what other option do we have? Do we have any other option to decarbonize maritime sector or any other sector? In that matter, no, we don't have. The only option is that to have a green fuels. I have worked for 23 years in the fossil fuel, right? And fossil fuel, in my view, natural gas will continue further. At the same time, when we say net zero, we don't say zero. Right? It means that both will exist, such a way that some percentage of transitions are necessary. And for that, to address those uncertainties, we need to take a small steps. When we say we, everyone has to put some money. And very good thing in earlier panel or Mr. Goyal said, lenders are skeptical about this new technology, and they are looking at this project as any other project. No, it's not going to work that way. If we are talking about cost, soft lending is very, very important. Governments have to come forward to support those soft lending, because it's not a job only one person, neither producer nor user nor government can do. Everyone has to come together in a collaborative way and to do it. And I'm also saying that it's not that's not happening, it's happening. Okay, if you look at our own country, government has provided enormous support to produce green fuel, and they're also putting now steps in the way of more to create demand to market maker. Government of Germany, there's a HINTCO H2 global tender, which is also playing a role of market maker. So those small steps has already started. It's the only thing is how quickly we act upon those steps, and For small steps, we convert to the little large, and then we start converting. And that experience will probably reduce the uncertainty, and we will be reaching to a level where things would look like very normal as we see for other fields. Thank you.
Yeah.
He very well said, small steps. Since all the stalwarts from marine industry are there, I want to suggest, if you feel suitable, IHI of Japan. In fact, Madam was talking about the availability of ammonia-fueled engines by 2027. So IHI of Japan has already developed and successfully deputed one engine of 2 megawatt, which is 100% fueled by ammonia. They have used that engine for a tugboat. I request you all, if you can place the thought process across, I'm spearheading this thought with the various agencies in government. Please consider deputing tugboats on Indian shores based on green ammonia fuel. So that will be our first step, small step which Hiranji was just mentioning. So we can really help to sustain the technology on mass scale level by these small steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And as you rightly, I think this is what the purpose of these discussions are, to highlight the issues and then also culminate into shorter steps or some early wins that we can identify. Ajay, any views on these early wins and the efficiency part that we're talking about, how we can actually leverage these opportunities going forward?
Well, we are talking a lot on the alternative fuels. Before I come to your question, Shruti, I am little wondered about what could be the workforce training. Are my crews able to work on methanol engine vessel or hydrogen engine vessel? I think we are lagging behind in that part, particularly India. We need a structured training institutes which are particularly focusing on alternative fuels. So that we have a regular workforce. Of course, we have a huge number of workforce in the maritime industry from India, and people are working across the globe. But this matter should be, a little bit focused. Talking about when you asked about this initiatives and all, I believe there should be a phase-wise approach. Short-term goal, long-term goal for starting with the coastal shipping, first of all. Then there should be a market for green shipping, I would say. Then there also need to be awareness for green corridors. That is also one of the important points, I would say, which need to be considered. And then developing knowledge clusters where all the stakeholders can come on the same platform, talk about, share knowledge, do some investments and do some innovative solutions. So this is something which I recommend.
No, very true. While we're talking about actually the resources and the technology, the enabling infrastructure, where we're talking about the lenders, where we're talking about the workforce, we're talking about this knowledge sharing and platforms, I think they will give a further push and impetus to the sector. And Madhuri, as a cluster, you actually bring everybody together. So your views on just last points on taking this forward and what you see can be done about it.
See, once again, firstly, I think G20 was a very landmark event that India has had. And I'm very glad that the whole narrative which India built during this G20, India is now being carried forward to Brazil as well. And the whole divide of the North and South, this whole green transition of the environment as a global entity should have been joining hands and bringing bonds. But unfortunately, it's creating more divides. But that's for very relevant reasons. While we talk about the Arab and the West, the fossil and the non-fossil transition. So Arab is trying to monetize the carbon capture, whereas the West is trying to put in their technology to do the complete transition. So where does India stand in this? Of course, much of the technology which is required for this transition lies abroad. So this is the time which calls for collaborations. In fact, mediocres think competition, legends think cooperation. And that's what the lesson that the whole world must basically work on as long as this whole energy business is concerned. In fact, someone quoted, I was not here when Rizwan spoke in the morning, but having spoken about the retrofits. So EBTC with Terry is the National Center of Excellence for Green Ports and Shipping. And Terry is leading that project. And EBTC is the European Union, but before they came out with their policy also was working. And we had a workshop in the PDPU, the Deen Dayal Energy University in Gujarat. And then there were a whole focus on
bringing in retrofits into, let's say, starting with the tugs. So I brought a tug owner with me, and he was sitting in the back bench. And then when it came, I asked him, would you go in for the retrofit? I said, never. He said, never. While the complete think tank went on to like get into the policy stage, but the person who's actually doing it is not inclined, because he said, I have to spend 80% cost of the new build if I have to go in for a retrofit. And then I do it. Then what is the surety that I'll get the bunkers where I have to? And where is the demand for this? And how long will I sustain? The sustainability part is very, very important whenever it comes to the transition part. That's what we have to look at. Of course, India is an economy which is still dependent. 70% of our energy requirements come from the fossil fuels. So there is an unprecedented haste being created for us to basically comply with the global requirements. But we are I'm glad that we have taken a stand that it will not be that easy for us to do the transition. And we will put our minds together to see how long we are going to take in ourselves. And then the World Bank has recently reported that India is going to contribute 20% of global economy in the next decade. So it's time for us to call the shots. And I think as long as the technology is concerned, of course, people are talking about Japan, the Mitsubishis and all. The way the ports are now working is in a completely hybrid model, where we have the solar and the wind energies on the grid, and the hydrogen or the ammonia both are only catering for the seasonal deficits, meeting the complete total requirements of those ports as such. Though, I mean, 3 green hubs are being created, Paradip, POC, Kandla, and that they will set the whole tone that how the whole transition to hydrogen also happens. And ammonia, of course, if you put on ammonia on ships, you have to increase the storage to double the size of what you have now. Are you willing to increase the size just to store ammonia on board? And just ammonia storage, ammonia usage on board, will it have to be converted to hydrogen when you put into the ships or in the engines? Will these engines be operate also on methanol and ammonia, or methanol and hydrogen? So what kind of combinations are really going to emerge? Small ships, experimental ones, yes, but is it sustainable? The supply chain doesn't move on the small ships. We can do inland waterways, coastal shippings and others, but that's hardly any percentage of the total trade that's moving on the high seas. So if we have to come to that stage, really, I mean, a big thrust is required on the comprehensive technologies to come in and start right now.
Great. Very nicely summarized it.
One lasting thought I wanted to leave with the audience is that, is it the right path that is being followed, or is it the path that is being shown to us? If somebody is, pointing the torch at you and you're walking towards it, is it the right path? Because the moment the world realizes the potential of AI, it's being underplayed like anything. Because there is a colonization is going to happen by 2030. We'll be all colonized in AI haves and AI not haves. Trust me. And also when it comes to, the only technology which has not evolved in like generations is mind-boggling is batteries. What's preventing us from going into the batteries? Because when we work on these hydrogen fuel cells, suddenly somebody is going to come up with the nuclear miniature batteries. The whole market is going to go on a roll after that. So we also have to put our minds together whether this is the right path to work on. With the research, monies have to pump into the research in India. Because of course, when we have seen World War I and II, the technologies that were used are never the technologies that I talked about. Thank you.
And no way, I mean, are we going in the right direction? I would suggest I would go with the thought process that we can't have these mega transitions offshore. I think we are taking smaller steps. The government is initiating certain policies, etc. We see the technology build up, and I've witnessed the changes that we saw in the renewable when we were purely coal-based energy resources, and we've seen how solar has come and now is as competitive as the fossil fuels. I think, but the pace and time is something that has to be very, very indigenous to us. We have to see what our capabilities are, what our priorities are, and then work according to that. But I think the need for the transition, I think I'm sure everybody appreciates that. How we approach it is something which can always be discussed, and or if we could have your point of view on that as well. Right?
I mean, first of all, I think, it's a great conversation. I guess it also represents what we try to do on a day-to-day basis when we speak of uncertainty, right? Like, what is the fuel cost going to be like? What is the solar panels cost gonna be like? Can I actually produce it at cost parity or not? Or is there regulation, right? And I mean, there is no answer to any of these questions. Like, and I think it's just part of the companies as well to learn how to be agile. You know, we just cannot sit and wait government to do everything. But again, like in India, we have government, at least in, I mean, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, which is super like active, proactive, understanding, you know, what is needed, like, you know, what can they do differently, how they can remove that uncertainty. I think that's a healthy way to start. Like, you know, a very good collaboration between industry and the regulation. But second, I think we really quickly have to get down to the numbers. Like, you know, okay, what is the cost? What is the, I mean, how much difference do we speak about? I mean, for example, I also keep hearing like different pilot projects, but you know, believe me, I haven't counted so many, but the number of pilot projects in Europe in an early phase is usually can represent 10% of what you spend. If it's a government grant, could be even more. In India, I think we tend to, how can I say, wait for someone else to take that lead. I think we all as companies or like others, like we are all empowered, and I think we should just also allocate probably more money in that experiments or pilots or whatever we say and quickly discuss the numbers, because otherwise there's no way. I mean, I can again give this example from the port electrification project in Norway. What happened? I mean, there was a specific port and they had to electrify. But then you had to bring a submarine cable to electrify this port, right? I mean, unless actually we had that regulation, we could have never got down to the discussion with the grid authority. And in the end, we actually found out the battery was the solution. I mean, you basically charge the battery and then the ferry is charged through the battery, right? So, I mean, to get to that type of discussion and to scale it up, you actually need a specific project to discuss. And then the regulations also become more meaningful. But again, I mean, in general, my experience in India, I think there's a very healthy, at least regulatory and political environment to discuss. And most of the time, at least, I mean, even at the top level, I think they're quite receptive to hear and listen.
Great to hear that, and as Cochin Shipyard sir was explaining that, you know, for one kind of a technology, you have 7 startups, you have multiple collaborations within India and outside of India. I think that's the kind of platforms that need to be created to be able to find solutions, to be able to find a pathway in terms of, bringing in improvements in efficiency, bringing in improvements in technology, and making it all affordable. I think that's what we need to do. We need to kind of propagate, along with obviously the mindsets, the enabling infrastructure. With that, I would open the forum for any questions. Right, so over there, sir. Yes, sir.
I have 3-4 points. One is you all know the Suez Canal issues. You know, the distance between India and Europe is reduced to 7,000 kilometers, around or little more or less. Now, due to these Suez Canal issues, the ships has to take the long route and will take more voyage time and consume more fuel on that. The one point. Second point, Mr. Singh, you said the consistency speed of the ships. Just as I'm just innocent on this, I just want to know, is there any speedometer to control the consistency of the speed or not? This is my one point. Similarly, next point is is there any IMO? Is there any other agencies there? The average ship lifespan of the ship is 25 to 30 years. Is there any monitoring body who is monitoring that all end-of-life ships are still in operation or not? Because they also, consume more fuels on that. And the last point is the container scanning system. All major ports must have the container scanning system like in USA or Europe, because most of the fuel is consumed on the tracking of the containers. Up and down, A or B, C, D, or where it is. And that you rightly said, one of the person, the unproductive movement of containers. That's very important. And we are really facing problem when you go to the port. Where is your container on the digital system? It says A+ or A22. When you go to A22, no. It has been shifted to C23. So, the skilled person or unskilled person moving the crane, he doesn't know where digital system is showing the movement of the container or lying of the container. He just took the container, put it somewhere else without updating the system where it is yours. And we are running here and there. Crane is running here and there, and we giving some money. Buy mera container trace kar do.
So you'd like to take that?
Moderator can decide who will answer which question.
It's all up to you. You are all professional.
So the first thing is Suez Canal problem. Of course, the geopolitical uncertainty that has brought in is pretty huge. The North Arctic program is taking good shape because of these kind of occurrences. Of course, it's creating a difference of almost like 20 to 25 days in a particular voyage. But there's hardly, because if you see that the geopolitical uncertainty is not only the Suez Canal, but the complete, if you calculate the tonnage miles that have gone up drastically in these last few years, and also the kind of ships that are plying the supply chain routes have also changed drastically, in fact. That is what actually led to the tonnage miles. So this kind of uncertainty is not only by Suez Canal, but Hormuz, you see what's happening with the Americans now, or it is Aden also you see. So there's bottlenecks are basically controlled for geopolitical interest. That will remain forever. So we'll have to find solutions to that. One is that you asked about the ship speed. Of course, everybody who's been on a ship knows that it can be speeds can be controlled, and if you go to autopilot, you can actually put your speeds in charge. End-of-life ships control, of course, it's a class mandate. If your ship, wherever, what flag you're flying, it's a class mandate. They also monitor. In fact, India DG Shipping has also come up with its own guidelines or a regulation, I would say, which is mandating 20 years for registration, 25 years for recycling. That the whole monitoring it's IMO mandates, that the class administration must ensure that the end-of-life ships go into the recycling. But there are certain provisions to bypass this particular route. So that's being put to check. But as this fleet is growing older, in fact, now, because the new ship builds orders are pretty less because of the uncertainties. But I think there's more or less that particular aspect is being monitored when the ships end of life are being. But sometimes they go to they are being sold. The cash buyers, the large cash buyers sitting in Dubai and Singapore, the ships are bought and sold even at after having sold them for recycling. So those kind of, because there is an interplay of jurisdictional governance. When a ship is owned somewhere, flagged somewhere, sold somewhere. So even the IMO mandate and the regulations do apply, but it becomes difficult at times. But more or less, I think it is being controlled. Container scanning, yes, that's one thing that with the new technologies coming in, the 3D scanning is being done where the whole containers can be scanned. Americans use the gamma scanning technologies where on the move also the scanners can be scanned. There is also a thought that all our transportation assets must also be geotagged, where they can be monitored when they're moving and from point to point, they can be monitored. So that can bring in a lot of efficiencies actually. And so is with the containers. In fact, a lot of people are using these, the biometric technologies with the scan cards, what are they called? The near field biometric technologies. In fact, when I was in the Ministry of External Affairs, we had a bilateral arrangement with Oman where they talk basically NLP 2.0 they were interested in, where these tags were being utilized for movement of cargo and tracking of cargo end to end. With the new ports, I'm sure we will have the new technologies also coming in.
Thank you. And I think we just have one last opportunity for one last question here. Thank you. Just keep it short if you can. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Anand Sagar from Petronet LNG Limited. I attended a similar conclave on green shipping 10 years back. The alternative fuel was LNG at that time. A prominent member of forum is sitting over there, and previous members are also there. I wanted to put this question actually in front of them. What is the difference hydrogen and ammonia is going to make, which LNG didn't make? And I don't think LNG is even 1% of the bunker fuel which we are selling right now.
Right, sure. I think many people would be keen.
I'll just have like one sentence. I mean, that's what I was just checking on my mobile. I think today in the world, 40%, and if you add steel probably, of cargo are related to oil, gas. right, and coal. So if you're able to eliminate just the transportation of these fuels across countries, I think you will be able to achieve quite a lot in terms of carbon emission. I think the difference between the hydrogen and LNG has to be, produced somewhere and usually transported. You don't actually eliminate the transportation problem. Whereas at least in green hydrogen, for a country like India, you can really eliminate quite a few of the, coal, there's a high import, oil, there's a high import degree, same for LNG. I think, to me, that's a major difference. Can we really eliminate that, 40% plus cargo?
So do you provide a timeline, something like that? Because we have been talking about green shipping for the past a decade itself. So do we have any timeline for this? Because the situation of environment is getting worse each day we are passing. And we are having conclaves which are beneficial, and we are also developing technologies also. But a sustainable technology regarding green shipping has really been not a proven one till date.
So I think that was a point that was discussed. There is no specific timeline. I think it's an evolutionary process which is going on, a lot of technology aspects. And we heard about supply chains, we heard about regulation, we heard about workforce and lenders, I think. But I think the pace has picked up. We've seen a lot of policies which the government of India has brought out, and there's a spate in that. We see a lot of pilot projects happening. And as Madad was saying, it's difficult to put a timeline, but at least the force, the driving force, the policy and the commitments from the sector are coming. So we hope we will all see the light of the day and see green shipping plying on our seas. Right. So with that, I'd like to thank all the panelists, and thank you, Madad, also for your contributions and a very invigorating discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, speakers, for an absolutely insightful session. I'm really glad this turned out so well. And may I request all of you to kindly rise for the group photograph? And for all the delegates who couldn't ask their questions, I request you to send their queries on infra@fiki.com. We might take them up positively. Thank you so much, panelists. And with this, we come to the end of the Green Shipping and Ports Conclave. May I announce for our delegates and speakers to kindly join us for lunch on the third floor. We'll have the lunch on the third floor. Thank you.